Come with us on a journey to a place where information is unlocked, knowledge is gained, and the exchange of experiences welcome. This is the Knowledge Exchange, presented by Lakeland Community College.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here because this trip was just amazing. Before I get to that though, I'll tell you a little bit about how I got into birding. So while I was at Ursuline, the faculty could take classes for free. So a friend in the chemistry department said, "Do you want to take this ornithology class with me?" And I said, "Sure." So we learned like 120 birds that live in Ohio, and we went on field trips, and that was really amazing. And then at the end of that semester, my husband Adam and I, who's here, we went to the biggest week in American birding for one day. And we saw all these beautiful warblers, and the crowd was really friendly, and people were pointing out birds that we'd never even heard of before. So that was really what hooked me on birds. And so we continued to go to the biggest week every year and staying longer and longer, and I eventually started to volunteer for the festival. And that's where this trip got started. So I was volunteering as a van driver, driving, like the 15 passenger vans on the field trips that they offer. And what they do is they try to hook up a local birder who knows the area, knows the local birds, with a professional bird guide. So they connected me with Andy Walker one day, and we spent all day driving people around the van and finding birds. And we hit it off, and I was talking to him afterwards. They have like all the vendors and all the guides have little tables. So I went up to his table and I said, "Andy, what trip that you offer," because I was looking through the little, book of all the tours. I said, "What trip that you guys offer would you recommend that I do while I'm still young and relatively physically fit?" I was like, "What is the most physically demanding trip you have?" And he recommended the West Papua, Indonesia trip. So I said, "Okay." So I talked to Adam about it. I said, "Can we do this?" And amazingly, he said yes. I couldn't believe it. He said, "Yes, we can go." So that was 2019. We were ready to go. And then, of course, we were supposed to go the next year. And you know what happened? 2020. So it was postponed, and we were really disappointed. And then it was postponed again. And so finally, this year, I got to go. And I literally went right before I started this job. So I came home from Indonesia, and the next day was my first day here. So thank goodness there were no long meetings or anything, because I would have been asleep. So before we get into the trip, though, some of you are birders, and some of you are what we call non-birders, or normals. So I have to get some of you guys up on the lingo that I might be using, because I'm already saying birder, and you guys are probably like, what is a birder? So a birder is somebody who actively seeks to find and identify birds, sometimes in a competitive way. Although my ornithology teacher, he said, "It's not a competition." And I was thinking in my head like, oh, but it is, or it could be. So that's a birder. And don't call them bird watchers, because most of them don't like that. That's a much more passive hobby. So a life list is a list of all the bird species you've seen in a person's life. And people are touchy about their numbers. It's like asking somebody how much money they make. If you say, like, how many birds are on your life list? Like for some people it's a flex, but other people are like, I don't want to share, and then they keep it secret. So anyway, that's the life list. Then there's a lifer, which is a bird that you're seeing for the first time in your life, and sometimes, especially on this trip, it's a true lifer where you're never going to see it again, probably, because it's so remote or so far away, or it costs you so much to go on the trip that you're never going to get back there and see that bird again. So we call that one a true lifer. On this trip to Indonesia, just the West Papua part, I probably got about 200 lifers. So that's pretty amazing to see. And we focused on certain birds, so it was more quality, not quantity, because other trips you could get like 500 birds if you're going around really fast looking and like not spending a lot of time on just one bird. A lister is someone who keeps track of the birds they've seen. Sometimes there's multiple lists. There's a county list, there's a state list, there's the world list, there's the year list. There's some people even, get into the month list, so that's a lister. I am definitely classified as a lister. I have my list of birds on eBird, and I like to keep my year list, and I like to do my Lake County list, so that's a lister. Endemic is something I'm going to be talking about a lot because a lot of the birds that we saw are endemic to very, very small regions. So endemic means the species is unique to a certain region, maybe a state, maybe an island. Islands are really great for endemic species. Whenever birders talk about going to islands, the first thing they think about is, well, how many endemics do they have there? So a lot of these birds that I'm going to be talking about are only found in very small areas, maybe on a small island, maybe in a one mountain range. So hardly anybody's seen these birds, and they're just so unique and so special and hard to get to. So they're all endemic to certain areas. I may use the word bop, and that stands for bird of paradise. So if you hear me say king bop, red bop, that means, bird of paradise. And the last one is a lek. So a lek is about more a biology term, not just lingo, but it's the area where the males perform their courtship displays. So I am going to show some videos of some of these leks where the males are doing their mating dance. They're trying to impress the females. There may or may not be other males competing. There's sometimes multiple birds. So that's what a lek is, and I'm going to show you some of those. And then this bird here is just a Brahminy kite for eye candy, so you have something to look at. That's a quite common raptor, so I had a good picture, so I was like, I'm going to put that one in there. Okay, now that you know about birder lingo, let's talk about West Papua, because a lot of people are like, what is West Papua? So West Papua is a territory in Indonesia, and so you have, this is the island of New Guinea, which is just north of Australia, and it's a pretty large island. If you ever look on Google Maps, like it's a good amount across Australia, and the eastern half is its own country, Papua New Guinea, and then the western half belongs to Indonesia, so that's West Papua. And so when we went to West Papua, we first landed in Manokwari, which is right there, and we spent the night there. Then we went up in the Arfak Mountains to find some of these very special birds of paradise. The Arfaks are right there. We spent a few days up in there in a village, and we also backpacked up higher in the mountains, so I'll talk about that. After that, we came back to Manokwari. Then we took a short flight to Sorong. So we went over here, and we had an overnight in Sorong, and then a morning to do some birding in a village nearby, kind of nearby. Then we took a ferry to Waigeo Island. So we went from Sorong to Waigeo. We stayed a few days on Waigeo, and we did do one afternoon on a smaller island right here called Cree Island. So I'll talk about that little island if we have time. And then we took the ferry back to Sorong, and then we flew home, which took about 2 days. So that's the trip. So why would you want to go to West Papua? Besides the fact that, Andy said it's very physically demanding, and I should do it while I'm young. I want to see these birds of paradise. Some of you, if you any of you watched Dancing with Birds documentary on Netflix? Okay, great. So my video is not going to be nearly as good. You watch that and you think, yeah, I'm going to get these videos, and then it is what it is. But I've seen those videos. I've seen a lot of nature shows growing up, and always thought the birds of paradise were so just bizarre and interesting. And so the area of West Papua is very diverse, very species rich. So there's 718 bird species recorded in the territory, including 595 birds that breed there, which is a big deal. The breeding population is a very big deal, not just birds flying through on migration. There are 288 regional New Guinea endemics. That means they are only found on the island of New Guinea. There are 65 bird species endemic just to this little area here, just the West Papua area. And within that, you can find 26 of the 41 birds of paradise. You can find 37 of them on the island in New Guinea. So 26 of them can be found in West Papua, and then 6 of them you can only find in West Papua, and that's these 6. And we did see all 6 of these. I managed to get pictures of all 6 of these. So I'm going to be talking about each of these birds in detail, because we focused on, when you go somewhere that has endemics, you focus on the endemics because you want to get those birds. So you're like, well, you know, we're never going to go back, so we have to get these birds. So these are the birds we focused on. And many of these are only found in small regions of West Papua itself. They're not spread throughout West Papua. So the long-tailed Paradigala, we found that high elevation in the Arfax over in this region here. Same thing with the Arfac astrapia. And you know, the name sometimes tells you that it's endemic. So Arfac astrapia, that's where you're going to find it, in the Arfax. The Western Parotia also in the Arfac Mountains, but not quite as high. Then the Vogelkop lofarina, which we called superb bop because that's what it used to be called. That one's also a mid-elevation bird. And then the last 2 birds of paradise we saw, they're only found on Waigeo. So that's why we took the ferry to Waigeo, so we could see Wilson's bird of paradise and the red bird of paradise. So Manokwari was our first stop. I didn't take very many pictures, but we stayed in a westernized hotel. It was a normal hotel room. They did not allow you to bring your durian, so there was that sign, no strong smelling food. We did see some durian. We did not eat any durian. In the courtyard of the hotel, they actually had 2 southern cassowaries in a very small cage, and that's the only time we saw any cassowaries. We were kind of hoping to see them in the wild, but we didn't. And then they had this pool here. I never saw anybody swim in it. And I didn't go swimming in it because I didn't have my burkini with me. So that was Manokwari. It was basically a stop, and we stayed the night there. In case anybody got delayed, they could still catch up with us. So then we went up in the Arfax. It took about 2 hours to get up in the Arfax, and the roads were much better than I expected. Mostly paved, a couple times really rough, rocky, mud gravel. We had to wait to go up because the group coming down got delayed because of rain. It's supposed to be the dry season, but the first couple of days were really, really rainy. And they got delayed because there was water going across the road, and so they had to wait an hour or 2. Thank goodness they got out on time and still got their flight home, and then we got to go up a little bit later. The Arfax, a lot of people ask me, how high are they? The highest point is Mount Arfac, and that's about 9,700 feet. So these are pretty high mountains. And it's you can see here it's kind of cloudy, foggy. So it's a lot like a cloud forest. It kind of reminded me of some of the cloud forest in Hawaii a little bit. We saw some amazing sunrises. This one was up high. This is the same as the video opener. This is along the road, this one here, top left, and then this is in the village of Mingray. So that's where we stayed when we were there. We stayed in Mingray, which is like the cutest little village, and it was just amazing, the hospitality. So our main guide, Andy, has connected with a woman named Sheeta who spends some of her time in West Papua, where she's from, and some of her time in Canada. And she has organized all of these tour groups and basically gotten this entire village to host people. And they do this for about 3 months out of the year during the dry season when the birds are very active, and that's how this village makes their money. They own a lot of the land around their village, so where we're going and looking for the birds, it's on their land. These folks put us up. This is the building that Adam and I stayed in here and where we all gathered for food. They cooked for us, a lot of rice, chicken, and fish, and they would even do our laundry if we needed that. So the hospitality was amazing. Everyone was so friendly. And keep in mind, these folks have not had income for 2 years because of the pandemic. they were ecstatic to have us. We experienced that a lot, is where everywhere we stayed, and every restaurant we went to, everyone was so glad to have tourism up and running again. A funny little story. This is our, in the middle bottom, this was our little bedroom that we stayed in, and that was Adam and I, in our little twin beds, and you could hear some stuff rustling in the ceiling. So the first night, something bounded across my legs in the middle of the night, and I thought, what could that be? It didn't run, so I'm like, well, it wasn't a mouse or a rat, and probably wasn't a spider. It felt a little heavier. So the next morning we asked Andy, we're like, what jumped on us at night? And he said it was a bandicoot, which is a really cute marsupial. We never saw them, but they have like a little long nose. So it jumped across me the first night and jumped on Adam the second time we spent the night there. And he said he kicked his leg and flung his arm. I was like, it's startling, isn't it? So that was kind of a funny story about Mingray. But really, the accommodations were a lot better than I expected in a rural, rustic mountain town. During the pandemic, they had hot water put in our building, so we wouldn't have had that if we'd have gone in 2020, which was, it was a real plus to have that. So while we were in Mingray and Waigeo, we spent a lot of times birding from what's called a hide. So the Europeans call them hides. Americans usually call them a bird blind. And this is what, what did you do on vacation? This. This is what I did on vacation. So that's actually my arm sitting, across my arm. Adam's leg, you can see he's sitting down behind me. And then this woman next to Adam, her name is Amy, and she is a young woman from Australia. And then Alan is behind her. He's a surgeon from University of Miami. And then Shi Young lives in Jakarta, but she was from China. And you can't see Andy, but he's in the very back. So what we would do is we would leave before dawn with our headlights and our binoculars and everything we need, and we'd go down these little rooty, muddy paths and go into the hide and get settled while it's still dark, because you don't want to spook the birds. And then you wait. You wait for the sun to come up. You wait for the birds to come. And you can't see a lot. You can see this is the view out. So everybody gets their own hole, and you hope you chose well. You hope you chose wisely, that you're going to have a good view. And the bird is in that kind of empty area. That's where we were expecting. And they tell you the bird's going to come here, and this is what it's going to do, and it likes this perch, and they kind of give you as much heads up as possible. And you wait. And sometimes you can see other birds. You can hear everything, but you can't see anything except what's right in front of you, which is kind of frustrating, because you're like, there's a million lifers out there, and I can't see them. But we can hear the bird we're looking for. We can hear it call, and you can't really talk. And so Andy will point and be like, that's it, it's calling, and you get really excited. And finally it comes, and you hope it's going to display in its little display lek area. So the other thing about the hides is that's the only place where I really had mosquitoes biting me. And when they're biting you when you're trying to take the picture. That's what happens. You've got your camera lens rested on the little crossbar. These things are just made of sticks that they, little trees they chop down, sticks and tarps, and then they cut holes with the machete. So you're resting your camera on there, and you're trying to be still because it's super dark, and you're trying not to bump the camera, and mosquitoes biting your knuckle, and you're like, oh, I'm not letting go. I'm not gonna, I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing and get bit by the mosquito. Yeah, that was a little bit rough. And we were sitting, you can't tell, but we were sitting on these plastic chairs that the guides would load up, those plastic chairs you sit around in your lawn. So they'd stack up about 6 of them, put them on their shoulder, and they're carrying these things in the dark and setting it up before we go in there. And it seemed like every chair I had was very tilty, so I had to be very careful. So that's what it's like for most mornings, is you're getting up 4 a.m., going out, waiting for the bird. And it's very exciting, but also it takes a lot of patience. And this is what I was saying, where we focus on certain birds because we really want to see those specific birds. So one of the first birds that we saw in the hide was the magnificent bird of paradise. We split our group into two because these hides were tiny, couldn't even stand up in them. And our group got to see a male magnificent bird of paradise, and there's this fruit here, and the fruit is maybe about this long. It reminds you of an ear of corn, but then there's little kernels, kind of like a pomegranate. And so they were plucking these little kernels like you can see him doing there. And he didn't display or anything, but he came and he ate the food, and you can see he has like a very like velvety looking green belly that you can't see until the light is right. Up in the top left, you can kind of see his little curlicue. He has a curlicue tail, a lot like the Wilson's bird of paradise. I'll show you next near the end. He's related closely to the Wilsons. The females on the right, Chuck was in the other hide, so he got to see a female, and he let me use his picture of the female. You can see she doesn't have the green belly. She's got a lot of barring across the front of her, and that's what a lot of the females look like. She's just plain brown on the back. A lot of times the females are really hard to see. They blend in really easily. And if you look at his mouth, the inside is yellow. And I noticed that when he called. And so this is his call. So he made a lot of noise. So he was calling, hoping the female would probably come in. And he was in the dark, and I could see this bright mouth. A lot of them have a brightly colored mouth. So all the pictures, take a look and see. And I'll point it out when we see it. The next bird that we saw and got some pictures of, and these are Adam's pictures, was the superb bop. That in 2017, that species got split into 3 species. So the specific species we saw was the Vogelkop lophorina. There's a greater and a lesser lophorina also. And he just stopped by briefly, unfortunately, because this bird, if it displays, and we saw his little log, if it displays, and some of you may have seen, it has this like bright blue and this little cape, and it has these 2 little blue eye spots, and his mouth is bright yellow, and he circles the female with all this stuff going on, and he circles her on a little log. But we saw his log and we saw him, but we didn't see him do his display, but I was happy to see him. The next one was my very, very favorite. So the hide that I have the pictures of us in, we were waiting for this bird. And it came and it flipped some leaves and cleared its space a little bit, and then it left, and that was it. And it was time to go on to the superb bop hide. And I had to make a choice to leave or not. And I was like, well, I don't want to miss a whole species, so I need to move on. After we left, 10 minutes after, it displayed, and that was a real bummer. But I did get another chance to go to a different hide where one of these was displaying pretty close. So that's the one I got pictures of. If you look on the far left, he has 6 head wires, and then this like iridescent plate on his breast, and then this like bright triangle head. The female is the second picture. She watches from a perch above. And then the third picture, he's standing up and he's getting ready to do his display. And then the last picture is where he is, got his little, I call it a tutu, and he's, extended that out, and he's doing his little dance where he goes side to side and he does his head back and forth, and the little head wires go all around. So I have 2 videos I'm going to show, and Adam took both of these videos. The first one is him prepping the stage, and then the second one is going to be the actual dance. It is very dark, so especially the first video, because it was early in the morning. So watch for his head. You can see that little triangle thing on his head when he's moving around. And his eyes are bright blue. And he's flinging these leaves like really far. And that's his call, which is very crow-like. They're the size of a crow, they remind you of a crow, and they are somewhat distantly related to crows. So that was the prepping. Now I'll show you the little dance. So the dance, he usually hopped through, and he did this so many times and got interrupted that we saw the beginning. He hops through, hops back, then he does a little bow, then he stands up, and puts it out and then does a little sidestepping. So he's calling in the female. She just landed on the branch, that's why the branch is vibrating. And he bows, and there's a little tutu. This was the highlight of the trip right here for me. And he did it multiple times. Sometimes I just watched. And you can see that iridescent throat patch, but then there was another male in the area, and it kept interrupting him. So we never saw the whole dance, we never got to see him mate. But I was so happy to see just those, little bits of his display several times. So that was just really the highlight for me. So, and I was happy to get that on, that Adam got that on video. So, so the Western Protea was actually after we went higher up in the mountains. So we stayed in Mingray before and after we went higher. So we kind of went on this little backpacking expedition. So only some of the group went. So Adam and I, and then the two younger girls went, and then the guys stayed behind and did more, sitting in the hides and looking for the mid-elevation birds. But we went up to Camp David, and Camp David was actually a lot less rustic than I expected. Because I've been backpacking, you dig a hole to go to the bathroom and whatever. This is a little bit nicer than that. Another nice thing that happened over COVID was they built a new cabin. So the top left is where we slept. There was a tarp on a wooden floor, and we had inflated sleeping pads to sleep on, and somebody carried all this stuff. It was like 2 or 3 miles straight up the mountain, and they carried all these bags of sleeping bags for us, and we slept on the floor there. The bottom left, that's the old shelter. So it was quite an upgrade. The middle and top right, those are just some views from up there. There's a picture of Adam there hiking. You can kind of see what the trail was like, although in places it was so slippery and muddy. This was after we got to the top. Our lunch and dinner is there. We had Spam, green beans, and rice, which I was actually really happy about the Spam because it was really good, maybe because I was so hungry from the hike. And then the bottom right is our toilet. It's similar to the hides, where you have the sticks and the tarp all around for privacy. And that bucket there is for flushing. So there's a little ladle, and you put it in there, and it flushes, and it went to some pit a little bit down the hill. And I thought that was great, much nicer than normal backpacking latrines. So that was the conditions, and the hike took most of the day because we stopped and looked at birds. And one of the birds we saw along the way was the long-tailed paradagala. And this is the least known bird of paradise, so I was really happy to see it. They don't know about the mating system. They don't know about its display. It's kind of plain. All it has is this yellow and blue around its beak. And it was 30 or 40 feet straight above me, so taking its picture was kind of difficult, but we were happy to see that one on the way there. Once we got up to the top in the evening after we got settled, we went out to find the black sicklebill. And this was another highlight bird for me. The tail of this bird, the male is the black one, the female is the brown one, or maybe that's a young male, is 1.5 feet long. And this thing displays on the top of a snag and makes all these crazy noises. We did not see it display, we just saw it feeding on this same kind of fruit that's they like, but we heard it displaying. And the noise it makes is so bizarre. So I'm gonna play the noise. It's kind of like a laser, shooting a laser or something. Like Amy described it as she's like, I hear the space noise. What is a space noise? So. And it goes on the snag real high in the tree and makes that noise. And then it takes its wings up over its head like this, and it's like a blue stripe, and then it'll maybe go completely horizontal as it's displaying. I was sad to miss the display, but super happy to see we saw more than 2 of these birds. We saw a little small family group feeding once we got back to our camp. So that was pretty exciting to see that one and get halfway decent pictures. And you can see it has a yellow inside the mouth again. So that was the night we spent up in Camp David. And then the next morning, we had 3 birds we wanted to see, and we'd already seen 2 of them, the black sticklebill and the long-tailed paradagala. So the Arphacostrapia would be 3 out of 3. So the next morning, that's what we were like, Arphacostrapia, we got to find this bird. So we went up high and we're hiking all around and looking and listening. We have the local guide that knows where it usually likes to frequent and feed. And sure enough, a female came in, and we saw her fly around a little bit. The tail kind of spreads out. She's very beautiful. She's just all black. The male has like an iridescent green and like greenish blue face and throat. And when the male displays, he's similar shape to the female. He hangs upside down from a branch and his tail is sticking straight up. So that's what his display is like. And the sound that they make is like just kind of like that, like a clicking sound. So that was a nice bird, although she wasn't very cooperative for photos. But an all black bird is kind of hard to photograph because there's no features that you can zero in on while you're watching it. So the next bird was back down in Mingray, and it's not a bird of paradise, but it is my spirit animal. So this is the Vogelkop bowerbird. And the guide, it built this little structure here on the top left of the video. That's its bower. And it collects all the stuff, and it arranges it. Well, the guide had taken these bottle caps and strewn them around, and the bird didn't like that, and that's why it's my spirit animal, because I like everything just so, and so he's putting his bottle caps back. So, and it's a very, kind of a plain bird, but the fact that it makes this, instead of dancing, instead of singing, instead of being beautiful, it makes this beautiful display to attract the female. So that was an interesting bird. And the name Vogelkop means it's endemic to that Vogelkop Peninsula area of West Papua. So, and there's a lot of species of bowerbird. So that's the bowerbird. So next we went on to Sorong. So this is our view from the hotel in Sorong, which is again just another like ordinary westernized hotel. We could see the harbor. This boardwalk here was a 3-kilometer long boardwalk that was amazing. And that at the end of it was the village of Malagofuk. And we were looking here for a 12-wire bird of paradise, which we saw briefly, but I didn't get pictures of, and I never got my binoculars on it, so that was a little disappointing. But the kingbird of paradise, and then magnificent riflebird. If you've ever seen that viral video where there's this black bird with this blue triangular throat, and he's like this, and he moves his head back and forth, that is the magnificent riflebird, and it sounds like a slide whistle. So we heard that bird and saw it briefly, but we mostly focused on the kingbird of paradise. He's a little guy. He's about this big, and he was super hard to see. We saw 3 of them, males and females, feeding in the tree, which is this picture on the right, and you can see it was foggy in the morning. We got there before dawn also. And so this guy, I didn't see him display, but he kept going back to this vertical branch, and I had a little window through the vegetation, and I'm pretty sure that is his display branch, because they perch on a vertical perch just like that, and then they just kind of they're not like very exciting, but they move their little wings, and maybe they'll go upside down and move their wings, and the female watches from above. So I kept waiting for him to do something, but I got some pictures of him. So that was the kingbird of paradise. And you can see maybe his tail has these like 2 long wires that come out in curlicue at the end. So that was pretty interesting. So next up is Waigeo Island. And we spent several days here. We had some awesome sunsets. There's like a pier and then a beach. And we stayed in a dive resort. So this picture here, the second one from the lower left, that is like the open air restaurant where we ate. And then the little houses here, the one on the left is where Adam and I stayed, and then the one on the right is where Shi Young stayed. And it was a pretty hilly island, and so this is the view in the middle is from one of the hills. And then this is our room with our 2 little beds and the mosquito nets. So that's where we stayed. And then the bottom right is how we looked for birds in Waigeo. So there was this gravel road. We went out in 3 different pickup trucks, and the guides and the porters would ride in the back and stand like this. And if they saw something good, they would bang the roof for the driver to stop, and then we'd all pile out and look for whatever it was. And usually what we were looking for was western crown pigeon, which was like the most skittish bird. We got, quick looks at this giant turkey-sized bird that's kind of bluish gray, crashing through the branches, making all kind of noise, and then they would jump out and go flying into the jungle after these birds, sometimes barefoot. A lot of times the guides were barefoot or wore flip-flops, and they're just like booking it through the jungle after this bird, trying to relocate it so we could see it and photograph it. We never saw it well, but that's just how it goes. So that kind of gives you an idea of what it was like on Waigeo. One of the birds we saw really well in Waigeo was the glossy-mantled manucode, and we heard it all over the place. So this is another not very interesting bird. It doesn't even have like the yellow like the Paradagala has. It has a red eye, but it is very shiny. The thing about it is its song. So the manucode family are the only songbirds that have like a coiled windpipe, like a trumpet to amplify the voice. And this bird, the glossy-mantled one, it sounds like feedback. I will play the song in a second, but the song is just a sustained high note that sounds like feedback, and you can hear this everywhere. And one day we were birding the forest road because they would drive us in, drop us off, and then we would walk, and then they would catch up to us with the trucks. And one day we heard that noise, and Chuck, one of the other guys on the tour, he said, "Oh, I think our drivers are coming to get us." And Amy and I both at the same time were like, "That's the manucode," because he thought it was the squeaky brakes of the truck. So I will play this bird's song for you. It sounds like feedback. It's kind of strange, but that's what it sounds like. So for them, the voice, it's all about the voice. They don't have the fancy feathers or a fancy dance or anything. So next up is one of the most popular birds of paradise. A lot of people listed this as one of their favorites, and because it's endemic to just Waigeo Island, it was a big target, and it was one of the first birds that we went straight for after getting to Waigeo Island, because the Wilson's bird of paradise is very colorful and interesting. So we did the same thing. We get the chairs, go down the hill before dawn, get in the hide and wait. And this little guy I think he's adorable. I like the Western Parotia too. They're both adorable. So he's got his little like blue head. That is skin. There's no feathers on his head. He's bald. And then he has this little yellow patch and the red. So he's also a pole dancing bird. We did not see him display, but I thought he might do his thing because he started to go up that little branch there, and I know that's his perch. And he started to go up there, and what he will do when he's perching vertically, he's got this collar that just unfurls out from his neck, and it kind of like those lizards that you see that run around. So he's got this collar, and so again, the female's going to watch from above, and she's just going to see his head and this collar, and that's all she's going to see when he displays. And we did see a female, but I didn't get her in a picture. And notice he's got this green front, just like the magnificent bird of paradise, so he's related. And this one, you can see his tail really well, his little curly tail. So I do a video of him. He's not displaying, but he is doing his cleanup of his area. And at the end, he makes a little like cheeping sound that's really cute. Do you guys hear it? It's like beep. Okay, I'm gonna skip this slide and go straight to red bird of paradise. Red bird of paradise was the other Wagyu endemic bird of paradise that we really wanted to see. So the second morning, you had a choice. You could go back to the Wilson Bop hide, or you could go see red bird of paradise. Red bird of paradise is displays in the very top of a tree. And so there's kind of a valley, and it was like distant, a little bit distant across, and we were sitting on these benches, almost like an amphitheater, and watching this bird. And as you can see from the picture, there's the male and maybe a whole bunch of females. I think at one time we saw at least 5 of these birds. So I will play you that, that video. And this one's pretty long, and he does this weird thing where sometimes you can see in this picture he's displaying, he's upside down, his wings are going like this, and then he goes up the branch like side to side, and then he stops and he goes side to side more. So watch for that near the end. It's just really kind of amusing. So there he is, he's doing his feathers, and look at his tail feathers. Those long wire-like plumes are his tail feathers. There's 2 of them. The things that sound like cows are actual doves. Those are doves calling. There he goes down. He only did this once. I'm so glad Adam got it on video. He's really going to town. Yeah, he needs to impress them. So we really thought this was the moment right there. We're like, this is it. And she flies away. So I guess she just wasn't impressed. I don't know.
What was your lens on that?
Adam was using a 100 to 400.
400?
Yeah, did you have it zoomed all the way in? Yeah, because it was kind of across. So, I have one last slide with some non-birds of paradise, maybe some other interesting birds, and then I'll have time for questions. In the upper left is the mustache tree swift. That was Amy's favorite bird. It has that little white stripe. These birds are beautiful when they flew around. They're really long, narrow-winged. And then the lower right is the common paradise kingfisher. They call them paradise kingfisher because they have those long plumes coming off of their tail. You can't see it real well because the branch is blocking, but it's got 2 little white rackets at the bottom of its tail. And the paradise kingfishers were in the forest. And I thought, well, there's no water. I'm used to our kingfishers that eat fish. I'm like, why are they in the forest? Well, we saw that guy eat a skink. So he caught this thing and was eating it. I was like, oh, they eat little reptiles. So that's what they eat. We saw this large-billed heron on the way to Cree Island. And we were like going full speed in the boat. And I was like, heron! And so we stopped and looked at it. And thank goodness it wasn't something common. This was the only one of these we saw. So that was pretty exciting. Willy wagtails are also found in Australia. They wag their tail, so that's why they're called a wagtail. They're really cute. They were pretty prevalent around the resort where we stayed. The Wampu fruit dove we saw at that boardwalk area. And the fruit doves are really skittish too, so I was so happy to get a picture of that guy. This Papuan frogmouth here, there was 3 of them in a little clump, and these are nocturnal birds with a huge mouth and huge eyes. Unfortunately, they're always up in the tree and you're looking straight up at them. And so they're sleeping in the trees all night, and then, or all day, and then in the night they would fly around and do whatever they would do. And that was one of my birds that I really wanted to see because it's just a very bizarre bird. And then lower right is a white-bellied sea eagle, and we saw a few of those. And when we were in the resort at Wagyu, a lot of times in the evening we'd go out on the pier and watch like pigeons and doves and parrots and things like go fly to their night roost. And we would watch the eagles too, and the eagles there do the same thing as our eagles. We watched this eagle. There was an osprey that had gotten a fish, and that eagle just kept pursuing it, bothering it until finally that osprey dropped the fish and the eagle took it from him. So they do the same thing as our bald eagles. So those are just a few more birds. And there's plenty of time for questions. So I welcome any questions. Thank you all for coming.
How were the mosquitoes?
So the mosquitoes weren't too bad. In that one picture of me in the hide, I have that light green hoodie. So that's treated with permethrin. And so I would put the hood up so they wouldn't get in my ears. And most of the time, that hoodie plus my pants that were treated was fine. Like, I bought some DEET spray and brought it, and I actually never used it because the permethrin-treated clothing was enough. And really, when maybe a couple times out in the forest, like, one day I wore shorts, and that was probably not a wise move because I did get a little bit bit up. But they weren't nearly as bad as I thought they would be. Like, compared to Everglades, compared to Canada, they weren't that bad, so.
Compared to Menor Headlands?
Yeah, actually. Yeah, Menor Headlands in August is not that bad. So, any other questions? Yeah.
What month did you go in?
Oh, we went in August. So, yeah, right before I started this job in August. So, we actually went to Bali first for 5 days to kind of acclimate to the time change and rest up from the 2-day journey there. And that was end of July. And then the trip started August 3rd. And it was like 11-day trip, August 3rd to August 14th. So,
How was
yeah.
it adjusting to the elevation?
So I didn't think about that when I was there. And the whole time I was there, I was like, oh my gosh, when we were up in the Arfax anyway, I was like, oh, I'm so out of shape. And I was thinking that the whole time. I was like, man, because Amy and Shi Young were just like, just plowing up that mountain, and I'm like straggling behind, and I guess I did struggle a little bit with it, even though we got there and spent the night, and usually you spend the night and your body should adjust a little bit overnight. But yeah, I struggled a little bit. It wasn't that high, but still, it was where we were at the top, it was comparable to Denver, so yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you know what the name of that red fruit was that they were eating?
I do not, and I wish I did. Adam, do you? I don't think they ever told us what it was called, and that's what I was thinking. I need to look that up because I have no idea what it was. It was very unusual. I've never seen anything like it. And those birds of paradise, like every hide we went to, they had taken one of those and put it there for the birds to attract them to the hide area. So, any other questions?
Snakes.
Oh, snakes. So I worried about snakes because they do have, I think, one of the second most deadly snakes. And they also have sea snakes. And we did go snorkeling. I didn't talk about the snorkeling. I skipped that slide. But I was more worried about sea snakes than the regular snakes. And so the really deadly snake they have is not going to be where we were. So it was in the southern part. So I'm like, okay, that's okay, we're not going to be there. We did see some snakes, and Andy loves snakes. He was all about it. We saw a snake eat a skink, which was pretty cool. So there was other wildlife, and unfortunately, there was some really interesting insects. We saw a couscous, which is like this weird, marsupial-looking thing that's just hanging out in a tree. But we saw maybe 2 or 3 snakes, and most of them were small and non-venomous, and Andy was very excited to see them and photograph them. So I didn't worry too much about snakes when I was there. Before I did. Anything else? Any other questions?
You mentioned something at the beginning when you first arrived there at that first hotel, and something about the food, and I didn't quite grasp that. There was a sign, they had a sign posted?
Oh, okay, so
Durian.
durian. So they have this food in Indonesia. It's this giant fruit, okay, like this. And the outside is all spiky. And it's this fruit that's famous for being smelly. We didn't,
Down in the Asian market.
yeah, we didn't eat any, but people say it's like a very creamy texture and that it tastes really good, but it smells like rotting, I don't know, it smells bad. So you're not allowed to have it on buses. You're not allowed to bring it into public buildings or anything because it smells so bad. So yeah, that was the durian fruit is like.
I had a friend who bought some durian hard candy.
Oh.
And I had it and I was eating in my office. And people walked by, thought there was a gas.
Oh, okay, so that's the smell. That's interesting.
So it doesn't taste like smell.
I mean, yeah, you know, it's just sweet and but it's just
very
smell.
Yeah. Yeah, they were selling it alongside the road, and yeah, it's. Yeah.
Doves and things flying back and forth at night. What type of dove are indigenous to those?
So there were a lot of them. There's the fruit doves, like the Wampu fruit dove. There was orange-bellied fruit dove. There were imperial doves, so pied imperial doves. Imperial, it was like spice imperial dove, and those were big. Those were like bigger than our pigeons. Flying in it was interesting because they would fly. We saw a flock, and they were almost flying across in formation. So they have the imperial doves. The fruit doves are mostly the kinds that they have. But there was a lot of them. Like my field guide has a whole page of fruit doves, and then another page of imperial doves. So there's a good variety.
So did you get a special field guide just for that region?
Yeah.
I figured.
I brought it because I was like, well, somebody asked me something, I don't remember. So I bought this in 2019 or 2020, and it's already out of date because, you know, they split the superb bird of paradise into 3 species in 2017, and so it's in here as superb. And a couple other birds changed names because Andy would say the name, and I'm like, and you know, we would go over the birds every night. And then I would try to look them up and get a better feel for, oh yeah, I remember what that looked like. I remember seeing it. And sometimes I couldn't find them in here because their name changed. So, all right. Anything else? We got plenty of time for more questions.
Does it make you feel like you can really appreciate the videos that these professional people take?
Yes.
Now
Yes.
that, you know, you try to get those.
Oh my
lines?
goodness, yes, it does. And I had watched some, like, I don't know if you've heard of Tim Lehman. He's a National Geographic guy. So him and a guy from Cornell, they did a lot of filming. And if you go to YouTube and just look up Birds of Paradise, you can see all kinds of videos and how they made some of those videos. And they're like up in the trees on these little platforms, and they're slogging through the mud. Like just this morning I watched one about the Arphacostrapia, and they were slogging through the jungle and talking about how they've never documented the display. And then the thing is hanging upside down, and he was so happy to get that picture. And just the darkness. Like, you know, I'm standing there and I'm trying to get my camera, you know, lined up with the hole that is not always my height. And sometimes you have to squat a little bit and trying to hold it steady because it's so dark. Like we had our exposure down to like 1/250th of a second. And then as the bird moved, oh, it's blurry. So I was a little bit jealous of people whose camera had higher ISOs because ours only went up to like 6400, so
Yeah,
that was
it's
it.
never enough, it seems.
Yeah, your lens is never big enough, and I definitely was appreciative of those videos because it was so hard just to get pictures. So, anything else? All right, well, thank you all so much. It was so fun to share.
This has been The Knowledge Exchange, a Lakeland Community College production.